let the teachers, if they can take a pay cut, they need to, but the unions aren't going to let us do that. And until you're willing to get tough with them, it's really, this is true. And I love teachers. The unions don't do them any favors because why? They get rid of other teachers. They keep ones who've been here 20 years, even if they don't know how to teach. You know this. So if we don't cut spending, if we don't get a rein on this and quit letting the unions dictate these high entitlements, we're putting a Band-Aid on a jugular vein. We're going to be here next year, the next year after. You know this. And it's just frustrating. You know what I mean? And I like to, I want something done. It's just, we're all tired of it. I think I speak for about 60%. We're all for you. We volunteer. We do everything we can. We give our money. We do fun. We just raised thousands of dollars for the golf teams so they could have golf. You know what I'm saying? And it's frustrating. And I want somebody to really get serious about it.
All right, thank you for your comments.
I'm not sure if this is a district question or a state question, but I think the thing that's freaked most of the parents out the most is the sizes of the classrooms. And I know that that's a matter of funding, but I'm wondering if there's been any discussion of, the school board makes the decision of how they're going to use their budget, but the school board doesn't always listen to the people in the district they're representing. Once they're elected, they can make up their own mind. And is that something that the state government would consider regulating? Is like, you can't have more than 75 kids in a classroom, or a realistic number, 30, 35. And then the districts would have to use their budget to make that happen. And because I'm an employee of the school district, and I'm also a concerned mom with my eyes open, and I see a lot of money being wasted. That every time I see it, I think that could be money spent on a teacher. So my daughter isn't in a classroom with 37 kids in elementary school. Does that make sense?
Well, I think the first answer to your question is that it is probably both a state and a district question. It starts with the sort of fundamental observation based on the presentation earlier that the majority of money now comes from the state, but I think it's fair to say the majority of sort of day-to-day decisions are made at the district level. So it is possible, and we have at various times in the state said, in order to get these dollars, you have to do these things. The trick about your notion of saying no more than X students in a classroom would necessitate, and we would think this would generally be a good thing, that the state would have to come up with the money to make that possible. That's a challenge. The quality education model is part of our Constitution that requires the state to fund an adequate education or explain why we're not. Basically, we've taken the route to explain why we're not of late. So it is theoretically possible to do the sort of thing that you're describing, but there's a lot of whether we can follow through on that and find the money to make those things possible is another question.
What we constantly get from school districts, school board members, and the legislatures, don't take away our local control. Just give us the money, but don't tell us how to spend it. And I think that's not a reasonable plea. And I think you could argue this, I guess, either way. It might make sense for people in the community who are on a school board to make those decisions better than state legislators in Salem, many of whom have never even been in making those decisions. So it goes both ways.
I'd like to build on that. You mentioned the QEM, and we talked about the highs and lows. The QEM is old enough that it's also seen the highs. What I'd like to do for the public here is perhaps have Mr. Elliott or one of you tell us what the difference is between our current funding level and what that QEM funding level is. And then, of course, we'll be staring in the face that we had some good times and we didn't make much progress. Then I'll have a little question. The state projection is for perhaps a 10+% uptick in overall state revenue, reported in August and reaffirmed here for you. Would it be your expectation or your personal commitment to see K-12 funding rise at 10% in the next budget?
Two things. Explain what the QEM is and where we are. So the QEM is a quality education model, and it was a constitutional requirement to state that the legislature did not feel it's funding schools' adequacy, it had to provide a report to the public to say why. And the Quality Education Commission, the Quality Education Model kind of grew out of that. And what this group was designed to do, or tasked to do, was say, hey, what does a quality education look like? You know, let's talk about, 27 kids per classroom. Let's talk about all of these things. When we get all that together, what's that going to cost? And that was the report that came out, and that report and that model has been updated as we've gone forward. And the quality education model, I believe, right now has us about $1.5 to $2 billion short of where we need to be to make fund at that level. So that's what the quality education model, the Quality Education Commission has done. And so when people talk about that, there's the gap they're talking about. So that's kind of some background about this was designed to be what is this, what does the gold standard look like, and where are we short of the gold standard?
Okay, so that's the background on the QEM. I think your other question was whether we'd be in line for a 10% increase in funding or somewhere. You keep in mind we're state legislators with the state of Oregon. We have to think about prisons, state police, and programs for low-income seniors, programs, the Oregon Health Plan, and having said that, we are, my colleague and I are strong school advocates, but here's a glimpse into what my life is like doing that. My best friend in the Oregon Senate is Alan Bates. He's a physician from Ashland, and he is co-chairman of the Ways and Means Committee on the Department of Human Resources, and that means he's in charge of these programs for the poor, which are basically federal programs that the state puts money in. So they're essentially federal matching money. Most of it, like in the Oregon Health Plan, is 2-to-1 federal match, but some of those seniors programs are 5-to-1 federal match. So you cut those programs, and you're kissing away millions of dollars in federal money. And he said, Mark, if you cut DHS 19%, as we did in February, that's tens of millions of dollars that will not be coming into Oregon. You'll be making life more difficult for people whose lives are already very difficult. And you're not going to have that stimulus effect from all that extra federal money. And you want to do that just to keep education whole in February of 2012? That's what I was up against. Because there's no match, there's no federal match in K-12 funding. But that's what we did. And we prevailed. And it is a Sophie's choice when the state's broke, as we have been for the last 4 years. And those are the difficulties that we face, is why we keep going back to tax reform. Tax code system is broken and it needs to be fixed, not to raise more revenue, but to raise different kinds of revenue to stabilize the tax code that we have. But for us to say, yeah, we're going to increase school funding 10% next year, I don't think we would take that pledge. I think it'd be disingenuous if we did. Would we like to do that? Absolutely. I'd like to do that. I would like to keep some prisons open that are in danger of closing. I'd like to build this bridge across the river. I would like to restore some of the low-income seniors funds that have been depleted. And there's a lot of things that I would like to do, most of which is in education, particularly community college and higher education. But it's hard for us to take one program, essentially K-12, and say, we're going to do this at the expense of everything else. And that's a very difficult road to walk. And so I just want to let you know that that's kind of the fight that we have down there. Does that answer your question?
I didn't ask for the entire 10%. I was asking if the tide was rising 10%, would you let schools float up with 10%, health and human services float up with 10%? I'm not trying to do the whole budget, but you've already answered with your emphasis on education. That's great. So I'm hoping we'll see the 10% allocated to that.
I think you can count on both of us to work to get the most we can
I did vote for the levy, and I would vote for it again, and I hope it comes up. I know that's not going to answer all of our problems, but I feel I want my taxes to go to the schools, certainly, and so I just want to say that. But I have two questions, if you don't mind. Michael, I think my first one's for you. When you talk about the weighted, does that go to the school district, or is that per school in the school district?
No, so my job is to make sure that that $4.4 billion goes to school districts. So sometimes I'll say I in the state because it's just me. No, I fund the school districts. The school district then decides what school gets what money for what programs.
So if, because my children go to a school that is 70% ESL, so that doesn't mean that they're going to get all of that though, right?
No, it just means the school district is going to count those students and report them to me, and I provide that additional money.
So that's why the school district gets it. Okay, and then one other question, it could be for any of you, I think. My son also goes to a Title I school, and how is that affected? Is that weighted in when the school board looks at that?
So Title I, remember when in my presentation I talked about that 10% federal funding?
Yes.
That's Title I, Title II, Title III. These are titles that are the shorthand for like federal does give some money to ESL, not nearly as much as we do. Title I is the for poverty students or low income students. Title II, I think Title II might be special education or Title IV. These are federal money and they're not affected by the weights. It comes in a different formula. I don't deal with that. That's another part of the department. That federal money is affected completely different from state money.
Okay. That's part of that 10%.
Yes, so yeah, that's that 10%. That's not the stimulus, that's not the ARA dollars, that's just regular money coming to the schools through those title programs.
Thank you.
Sorry. Hi. One message I'm taking away from a lot of your comments is that there's not an immediate fix to this problem. I'm the mom of a 4th, 5th, and 7th grader. So I feel a sense of urgency for my kids to get the best education they can get. And I imagine that most of the people here are probably like me in our school communities and in our community in general. I need to know what to do. I'm a doer. Like, what can we do to help you make this happen?
We're both struggling for a good answer here. I think I go back to the notion of trying to communicate to our neighbors and friends, family and acquaintances and so on, the information that we're all learning tonight, and how important it is for people to understand the difficult choices and the need for some deeper conversations and understanding of how budget and tax choices impact the big decision. I'm afraid I don't have, as I said, something that's going to change it for the next year. I think we will be able to see some progress in funding, but it's not going to be significant enough to make a large difference. So I think it's a matter of continuing to build the consensus and the capacity amongst voters to engage in that conversation about comprehensive tax reform overall.
One thing that we are going to do in this next session is expand the expanded options in high school years so that more kids can earn college credits in those years. I know you're a few years behind that, but the idea is that kids can graduate from a high school with 10 or 20 college credits and thereby save that student and his family thousands of dollars for a bachelor's degree if they enroll in the state or stay where they go. So some of the low-hanging fruit that I think is still there that we can do in education without, hundreds of millions of dollars. It helps with college affordability. It helps parents, like all of us, quite a bit. And that's our priority on the Education Committee in the Oregon Senate. And it's not a consolation prize. I don't mean to sound like that in terms of the extra $1.5 million that we need to bring schools back to where they were. But we're looking at a lot of these kinds of things that help reform the system, squeeze more value out of it.
I have a number of friends who live in school districts where the parents make a lot more money maybe than they do right here. And the school districts have sent out letters asking parents to donate certain amounts to the school district to enable them to lower the class sizes. And I know that we've been asked to give to the Beaverton Education Foundation, and that's something we frequently do. But I'm just wondering, if we do contribute to the foundation, does that reduce the amount of money we get from the state? And is it possible for us to do what I know some Portland schools do, where they donate for an art teacher or a PE teacher or whatever, and they fund that teacher's salary by parent donations?
It's not reduced the amount you get from the state. You want to, yeah, there's state law on that. And so the more you give to your foundation, the better your school district is going to do. We're involved with the law goals. Bring school auction every year. They use that money to build tracks and lab equipment. You know, it's really an interesting commentary in our times. When I was a kid, there was no such thing as a school foundation. But anyway, bless your heart for doing it.
So I had one quick clarifying question on that. And that was, so if we do pass a levy, that money stays within Beaverton School District. I understand that. Does that at all change what we get from the state?
It depends on what kind of levy you're passing. State statute lists certain things that are considered local revenue, such that that would impact the money you get from the state. If that levy is outside of that, then that would not be considered local revenue. For example, a construction bond, that's not considered local revenue. Local option tax, I believe, is considered local revenue. So, yes, that wouldn't necessarily change what you get from the state. But
is it one for one?
No, it's not one for one. Because as I showed, as local revenue goes up, all statewide, and there's more money, it's like a rising tide. So if every district passed a local option tax, that would be more money statewide. That would mean every district's going to get more money through the formula. So it depends on what kind of levy you're passing.
And now for my other question, a little bit on the state level. So my understanding is that Oregon is 48th in the nation on instructional time. And I want to understand, so you've talked a lot about flattening out our revenues year over year, but how does our state compare to other states? We're obviously, or maybe not obviously, we have a good revenue compared to some other states, right? And yet we're 48th in instructional time. So I don't understand how those two ideas go together. I just wonder if you could speak to that some.
I think what we're struggling with is just getting the definition right. One thing to keep in mind is as you think about the other states, it's a question of what else we spend money on. We are one of not very many states that spends more on corrections, for example, than we do on higher education. So it's also a function of what we have chosen, partly as a result of legislative action and in large part as a result of ballot measures on which we've all voted, how to spend our money. So we are, depending on the methodology, if you rank the tax burden from 1 to 50, 1 being the highest tax burden, we're somewhere in the high 30s or low 40s. So in total, we don't pay a lot of taxes relative to other states. And then we choose to spend those dollars in a variety of different ways. So I think that's a pretty general answer, but that's part of the reason we are where we are.
I believe also to address your question about revenue.
I don't believe if you look at if you compare us across states, we're not necessarily that super high either in revenues. I think we're low 30s, high 40s as well. So there is a correlation there. It's not like we're #1 in the nation in spending on student and number 48. I think there is a correlation. It may not be 48, but it is in that range. So I think Massachusetts actually is #1 nationwide.
Follow up on the, on the local option levy. Hello?
Switch on the side.